Welcome, everybody, to the City of Farmers Branch study session for Tuesday, October 8th. Thank you all for being here. Our first item of business this afternoon is public comment on study session items. I don't have anybody signed up to speak, so we'll move right along to C1, which is discuss regular agenda items. Councilman Roman.
So I had a question about J10. It's the stop signs. And my question is probably fairly simple, but I know that we have stop signs that were recently installed there. So what is this doing with that? Like, is this adding a different type of stop sign, or is this adding the authority that should have been there?
Okay. Good afternoon. Ray Silvarez, Director of Public Works. Yes, Councilmember Roman, this project, or this stop sign came from a request of a citizen in that area saying that there was concern for the public to cross right there at that intersection due to the public park, the city park that's right there, and the school that's on the east side. And so we were noticing some, the police department, the chief of police and I got together, we looked at it, saw there's some speeding going on there as well. So there's already 2 existing stop signs on Longmead. There's nothing on Dennis. So we converted that into a 4-way stop sign for Longmead, and then the driveway for the park that sits in the middle of that intersection. It would help control ingress and egress for that particular intersection.
Right, but the signs are already there.
So yes, sorry. So when we were asked for, we looked at that request, we were identifying the location and noticed that when that request came was early August and school was about to start. So we determined that it was something that's necessary, and we didn't want to interrupt the school pattern, the traffic school that's already going there. So we decided to go ahead and just put it in there before school starts, which was like a week or so right before, to not introduce something later on, and we come back and ratify it later.
Okay.
So that was the purpose or the intent behind it.
Okay, so essentially the stop signs are not enforceable now until this is put in place.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know. That's it for that item. Thanks so much.
All right.
And then I had another question on J11, and maybe I was completely zoned out or wasn't paying attention to this, but I don't recall that we had a discussion about who we were going to be nominating. And I don't know if is it common practice that the mayor's the one that typically does it, or I just didn't know how we arrived at that.
I do not believe it to be common practice, number one, so I'm not going to say that. I have submitted in the past, I think 2 times prior, to be considered for that board, because I believe the only way you can get any reform is to be part of the system there. It takes 15 votes. I think the most I've ever received is 4, as any other candidate. So they're pretty locked in to the folks they have on that board.
I see. So is that,
But if anybody else would like to do it, they're more than welcome to submit.
yeah, no, and I'm certainly not interested in doing that. I just wasn't sure if a discussion was had, that because I didn't remember initially when I saw this agenda item, I thought that somebody who might be a more natural fit would be like David Reed, because he's a real estate agent. But I didn't know if there was some reason or rationale for.
Anybody can apply,
Okay,
so.
okay.
Yeah, I received a request to put myself in the running for the board as well. I just opted not to, given everything else going on in life. So
Okay.
it's, I don't think it's specific to the city government for someone to, because I know other real estate agents who've been requested as well. So it's not specific to city government.
Okay. Yeah, no, and I think maybe, and I'm fine, I hadn't had a previous conversation with Councilmember Reed about it, so I'm fine with you being the person that we nominate. I just wanted to make sure that we had some sort of dialogue about how we arrived at that decision, because I didn't remember one. But that's it. I don't have any other items that I had questions on.
And Mayor Pro Tem Roman, just a point of clarification on that one. We sent it out on September 20th as part of the Friday update because they mailed it to the whole council, and we just want to know if anybody wanted it. So we put it on the agenda knowing council could change if anybody was interested in it. So it's just following process. But again, next time it comes around, if y'all would like it to be a study session item, we can as well. It's completely up to you all.
That all? Councilman Reed?
Yeah, just question on J6 in regards for the gas line for the Star Center. Just wanted to confirm whether the city is going to be reimbursed for this expense.
Hi, Perla Tavera, Director of Economic Development, Tourism, and Planning. No, the city will not be reimbursed. This was a project in the past, either the I-35 corridor or a prior project to us. They disconnected the gas line without us being aware of it. So when we went to actually install the gas line with Atmos, they said there was no gas line. So this is for the facility.
Okay, so it's separate from basically the construction?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Jackson?
So back on item J11, I wasn't clear. Are we nominating both you and Councilman Reed to be nominated for the DCAD board?
I opted not to apply.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's all. No other questions. Ben answered mine in our meetings.
Thank you. Councilman Neal?
Yes, I had a question on several of these. I know we have some new council with us tonight, and I just want to have some assurance that for J5, J6, and J8, that the attorneys have looked those over and made sure we have the correct protections from a city perspective. Just wondering if the legal department's had a chance to look at that stuff.
Yes, we've been very busy over the last couple of weeks reviewing all of these agreements as well as drafting the resolutions. So we have put eyes on everything that's on this agenda.
Okay, great. I know there's a transition going on. You're probably quite busy. I just want to make sure that we got those things taken care of for us. So.
Yes.
I think that's it, Mayor. Thanks.
So maybe as a follow-up to your questions, Councilman, we now requiring performance bond for any of the contractors that are working for the city?
Yes, that's always our recommendation, especially with contracts of this size.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Anything else? Moving on. Item C2, discuss the city's 2025 legislative platform.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Jennifer Rainey, Assistant to the City Manager. You will see in your packet a draft legislative platform, just a little caveat that it has been reviewed and that final version will have the signature block for with our new attorneys once we've crafted it all completely. So this draft legislative platform conveys our state legislative policy direction and our positions on potential issues that may come up this next legislative session. So just some important information, important dates on this legislative session. The first date of bill filing is quickly arriving. That's Monday, November 11th. Tuesday, January 14th is when the 89th legislative session begins. On that March 14th, that's the 60-day deadline for unrestricted bill filing in any joint resolutions other than any local bills, emergency appropriations, emergency matters from the governor. And then that's sine die or sine die, that is Monday, June 2nd. That's our end of the legislative session. You'll probably recall from last legislative session, it was extended and extended and extended, and I think a fourth extension. So that can extend, June 2nd is the scheduled legislative end, but that can extend multiple times. So a couple of other important dates are bills' effective dates. A lot of times by default, if a bill doesn't have a specific effective date, I believe it's 91 days after that bill is enacted, then it becomes effective. So that means within 91 days, the city and staff are working really hard to put that into practice to make sure we've updated our codes, updated ordinances, updated processes and policies. Examples would be like the shot clock deadline that have occurred in the past. So that's a quick change for all of staff. And there are a couple of other bill deadlines. There are some occasions where a bill can be effective immediately. That requires a larger vote and also requires some signatures there. Those are a little less likely, but typically it's 91 days after the end of that session, or if there is a requirement of the state or a different municipal party, maybe the Texas AgriLife Extension was required to do research first, then sometimes that can be pushed to maybe January 1st of the next year. So allow me to get a little bit nerdy in this process. This is one of my favorite slides. It's busy, I know, it's a lot of information, but this is the best one that I found kind of on that bill process. So this bill process documented here is a bill that was introduced in a Senate, and a senator would then file that bill with a secretary, and the bill is then formally read into record, and then using its caption only, it's referred to by the lieutenant governor to the appropriate committee. So those committees hold hearings and they can vote on those bills. They can say, yes, we like this, that's a little green thumbs up, or they can say, no, we don't like this. They can also say no hearing or left pending. So if it's not scheduled for a hearing or they didn't come to conclusion, then it can sometimes die in committees. That's the term that you'll typically hear there, is that it dies in committees. It can then go to printing and distribution and then floor consideration. In these areas, it can sometimes be referred to as dying in calendars, so it just never makes it onto one of these schedules for those readings. So it can die in calendars in the second reading or the third reading. Again, you have to have a thumbs up, yes, we like this, we're going to vote for this, or no, we're not going to. So it can die multiple times along the Senate side, and then it's passed across from east to west or west to east, depending on which side it starts in the House or the Senate. When it goes over to the House, it does the same kind of process, that similar flow. Again, it can die multiple times, but it also has to seek multiple approvals. As you can see, the bills that are left pending in committee, those won't make it further, and they just die off. Sometimes that's great. Sometimes those are things that would be controversial for us or be difficult for us to implement. Other times they can kind of simmer there until the end or closer to the end of the legislative session. There was one example, the last legislative session, where a bill that had municipal impact we thought had died in committees because it hadn't made it onto one of those agendas, and then it popped up in April, and then boom, 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 it moved really, really quickly. So all of that to say, there's a long process that these bills take from the journey from introduction all the way to enrolled and then becoming a law. Again, the governor has to sign the bill or take no action, or he can veto the bill. And that happened quite a few times. There were bills that were vetoed at the end of the regular session, last legislative session. Also, there are sometimes that bills are combined together. So when those bills are combined together, that's when we need a little bit of flexibility. And you'll see that flexibility or that broadness in the draft legislative program. When those bills are combined together, sometimes it's bills that don't make sense to be combined together. They might be things that are attacking local control or talking about property taxes and various things that are all bundled together, and then you throw in something to do with horses in West Texas. But a lot of times they'll bundle those bills together to try to seek approval or try to seek to kill that bill. So just a quick session outlook. Starting backwards, we'll start in 2023. During that legislative session, there were over 8,000 bills that were introduced. Out of that, over 1,800 of those impacted cities or municipalities in some way or another, whether that was fiscally or through processes, procedures. Attacking local control was a big part of last legislative session, and don't anticipate that going away. There have been murmurings and studies during the interim on different types of attacks on local control, so considering density requirements or short-term rentals. Those are things that have been discussed through the interim that I anticipate popping back up. So typically, our city council will adopt, and this is our city council and many others, city councils will adopt a resolution to support or oppose legislation on key topics, and then staff then use that resolution or that platform to advocate for the city or against bills for the city and for the residents. Staff will also monitor bills throughout the legislative session and then engage delegation on any of those bills. So having a broader platform allows us to jump in really quickly. If we go back to this bill process, a lot of times there's only a 24 or 48-hour posting for those agendas for those different committees. So being able to jump down there really quickly is beneficial for staff and it's beneficial for the city and our residents. If we were to have to come back to council to seek approval to send staff down, we would miss those windows and miss that chance to advocate for our community and for our residents. So just a little bit more background on that. 20 years ago, around 17% of the bills filed affected cities in some way. That continues to increase. Last legislative session, I believe, been presented on this 2 years ago. Last session, there were more bills as well. So that number of bills introduced continues to increase, as well as the number of bills or that percentage of bills that impact the city. So our legislative philosophy for many years has been based off of these three tenets or these three principles. Farmers Branch is the closest level of government to residents and bears primary responsibility for providing capital infrastructure, health, and safety. You know that best as elected representatives. You tend to represent 8 to 15,000 individuals, where our state senators or state representatives represent a lot larger cohort. However, you know the needs of our residents in the way, in a way that's more local and more closely aligned with our residents than those state senators or representatives. Farmers Branch also opposes legislation that erodes its authority to govern or finance its own local affairs. So anything that's attacking that property tax, attacking how we can spend or utilize our money, how we can best serve our residents, and then also anything that is an unfunded mandate. So an unfunded mandate is a rule or a requirement that we are now governed to do by the state, but we don't have the funds that are attached to that to act on it. So we're not provided any additional money. They just say, this is what you're expected to do. Go do it. And then lastly, Farmers Branch opposes those unfunded and federal or state mandates. So coming out of that, based on that history, the following has been developed as our 2025 legislative platform. Local control and the Death Star bill were highly discussed last legislative session. So we want to make sure that we support legislation that advances our strategic goals and our interests, that improves the health and safety and welfare of our Farmers Branch residents, that allows the city to sufficiently fund its services and operations, and provides tools and resources to enhance the quality of life of our residents. And then on that side, we would oppose any legislation that is detrimental to that, that is contrary to the health, safety, and welfare of our residents, that mandates any increased cost or results in loss of revenues for our municipality, that adversely impacts municipal operations. Those are those things like those shot clocks, the Death Star bill, density, short-term rentals are all topics that will be heavily reviewed in that. And then anything that diminishes the authority of the city. So if the state says we're no longer allowed to do something that we're currently allowed to by state statute, that would diminish that authority. So bills that support local control allow municipalities to decide the best way to zone for density, to care for our residents' property. Those would be ones that we would be able to act on with this platform. And then those unfunded mandates, revenue reductions for municipalities are bills that we would likely be able to oppose. We can also take this opportunity to support some of our community partners, our legislative partners' platforms. So platforms such as the North Texas Commission or our local ISDs are often supported as long as they don't directly conflict with ours. And there are occasions when they will, but most of the time they're pretty aligned. And if there were an occasion that they did directly conflict, then we wouldn't support it in that area. Do I have any questions?
Council, any questions? Councilman Neal?
Yeah, real quick. Thanks for the presentations, very helpful. And I noticed there's, in some of the slides, there's comments there about impacting to the revenues of the city, et cetera, that they might act on. I'd like us also to be mindful of services that our residents and community are accustomed to having. It's not always about just the revenue, but if there's something that comes out that our residents and citizens enjoy that is potentially impacted by some legislation, I'd like us to be a voice, to protect that sort of thing. So that's the only comment I had. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Councilman Jackson?
How soon after the November 11 filing will we have a list of those bills that would impact our city?
So that list continues to grow. Typically, those are the kind of big bad ones that they start out with. Those are ones that they've probably had interim charges on and have discussed at length before. But that list starts pretty early. On that November 11th, they'll start filing those. And we can continue to track those as that list grows. It will grow very, very quickly through about early March, and then it tends to kind of stabilize.
Okay. And then, so after we get that initial list of bills filed, I'm assuming, the council will be briefed on, the important topics, but then Ben meets with representatives, senators, maybe involves the mayor. Help me understand how the conversations sort of begin to develop from there.
Absolutely. Would Ben? Me?
Okay, so you'll get a weekly update from me that puts all bills in perspective that could impact the city of Farmers Branch. The list grows quickly. It's a very long report at the beginning. And I keep awareness because a lot of the bills have a lot of potential, but I'm looking for that potential to not only impact the city, but actually move through the process, which takes a lot. As you see, that starts with almost 10,000 and gets down to a couple hundred that could impact the city. And even if they get passed, some of them get tied up in the court. So it's kind of giving that council that fair assessment of where they're at. An example of something that the city would move on quickly would be point of sale versus point of distribution for sales tax. It has the potential to hurt the city's budget over $1 million per year. That is something that we would move quickly on. And there's interim charges, interim process is happening as we speak. As of next week, we're waiting to see how the legislature's talking about and discussing this, but I would go as your city manager based on this platform and say we're firmly against it because it hurts the city of Farmers Branch's budget. And so in that case, typically I'd send it to the council and let you all know there's an opportunity to where we need elected officials down in Austin to speak, because you all are the heavier hitters when it comes to the policy and how it affects the city. When it comes to that sales tax and budgeting one, that's where I'd go down and discuss the budgetary impacts with other city managers. So there's different times you send different people depending on what the topic is, but that's where I need direction from council on this platform, not only what we're going to talk about, but who do we send as the council, because we're not going to have time to bring you all together every time something comes up. But this legislative session looks like it's going to have some things on it that are concerning for the cities.
Right. And so on a bill like that, I would assume that practically every city around us would be opposing that as well.
Correct. And Capel's got the lead for that litigation because it's actually in litigation and in the legislature. It's all over the place. But
So
yes.
we're collaborating with the cities on bills like that. But for bills where not every city would agree, for example, zoning laws and such, some cities are actually in favor of the bill that we would be opposing. Would we still be talking with those cities? Does it help to join forces with the cities if there's not a lawsuit?
It always helps to join forces because there's a lot larger cities with a lot larger budgets that have strong feelings on these topics as well. So we find company with those that have a similar alignment, because what it really comes down to is local control. So in that one, it would be removing minimum lot sizes, which is a big concern for a lot of cities like suburbs that don't want that ability taken away from the council. That rests with the council today. But if the state gets involved, it could be taken away from the cities. Then all of a sudden you could put a quadruplex on a single family lot because there's nothing the city could do to stop it. And a lot of the times you see there's a lot of discussion points as to why. Well, they're going to say we need more access to housing. The counter to that, though, is we already have parking on our streets. We have infrastructure that hasn't been assessed for this increase in demand. And so there's a lot that goes into that conversation beyond accessible or affordable housing. And that's where that conversation tends to start. And so at this platform, it's really not about that topic. It comes down to the control shouldn't be taken away from the council. You are closest to the public. You know this city better than the state legislature does because you were a smaller number of people you represent.
Right, okay, good. It's helpful for me, but also for those that are watching our study session today to kind of understand the activity that goes on behind this. This is really important to us. And there's probably there is a ton of work that's going on that really isn't visible to our residents that we're, doing on behalf of them.
And then the other part is if something came up, I would reach out to the mayor, mayor pro tem, and deputy mayor pro tem to see who's available. If something comes up immediately, I would just follow the hierarchy of the council that you all have adopted and said, okay,
Right.
mayor, mayor pro tem, I'd reach out to all three of you all at once to avoid any quorum issues and see who's available and who's comfortable talking about which topics. And we would move quickly.
Yep, very good. Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Reed?
Quick question. I love your nerdy flow chart. At which point in the flow chart does the city get involved?
We can get involved in many of those. It's making fiscally wise decisions, like Ben mentioned earlier. There are a lot of bills that are filed, and we could send people down there every single bill that impacts us. But waiting until they get to some of those committee hearings and seeing what that feedback is really helpful to see what they've heard so far. A lot of times they may just not yet be informed or fully informed on the impact or maybe the equity of the impact. So a lot of times it's once they get to those committee hearings and you've got a general understanding of what their thoughts are or their concerns are with a bill is an area, an opportunity for us to go in and advocate for that.
Thank you.
Ben. Councilman Baird? Councilman Roman?
I'm happy with the legislative priorities that we have, and I think it's fine to use the ranking order that we've already prescribed. That's it.
So, thank you, Councilman. I would like to pass out to you all. These are the legislative priorities that the North Texas Commission put together. And I just wanted you all to have an opportunity to look at that. Ben and I attend some mayor's meetings, and North Texas Commission makes presentations to us. This has been a work in progress or process for quite some time, but obviously the five main areas of business competitiveness, education and workforce-related initiatives, health and well-being, local government, and then water and infrastructure. And so I think it's important that we recognize that there are groups out there, such as the North Texas Commission, of which we are a member, that are also assisting us in addressing needs that affect the city in addition to the priorities that we might be approving for just Farmers Branch alone. So I'll give you all a minute to look that over.
I need to get a copy to Stacy.
Hmm?
I need to get a copy to Stacy. Oh, because you handed it out. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I just want to make sure it's in public record now.
Yeah. I would say as we move to adopt our own priorities, if you would like, I'm happy to request Chris Lee from North Texas Commission or Chris Wallace, either one, to come and address council in regards to what they've put together. If anybody has questions, this is going to be an ongoing process, so we can certainly have them come at one of our upcoming meetings.
Council's good with the direction.
Yeah. So, council, let me just ask here, hold on, my computer timed out. like to get an indication from you all as to whether you all are in support or not of the legislative priorities that have been spelled out here. You had a copy of it in your, the attached resolution 2024-141. You already said yes.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Generally, yes, there's a couple of small things that aren't even really worth discussing, but, so yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm in support of the resolution as written.
Okay, very good. Councilman Jackson?
I'm supportive.
Thank you.
Generally supportive. There are a few items that might need clarifications, but generally supportive, yes.
Okay. Does that give you what you need to move forward?
All right, wonderful. Are we going to support or endorse North Texas commissions as well?
I would assume that we're going to support what they've outlined here, but I can't speak for the council, and since they've only,
Had a
are
short
just
meeting.
now seeing this,
Sure.
many of them for the first time, I'd like to give them ample time if they need additional time to review. Or
Absolutely.
you got to come.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe we can have another study session item to come back and kind of talk about these in a little bit more depth and have a little bit more time to think about them and research anything that we might need to research. At the same time, I had a meeting with the superintendent and the president of the school board in CFBISD, and we were talking about jointly working together to support one another's initiatives. And I think you alluded to working with different organizations. So I think that might be an appropriate time to also learn a little bit about their legislative priorities and see if there's any that we can jointly collaborate on.
Okay.
So maybe the meetings, the theme of that discussion can be other organizations and collaborating.
So I know that our next meeting, we have a very full agenda coming up. So let me ask City Manager, can we put this on for the December meeting, or should we schedule a separate?
So what I would do is, because the legislative process is going to move quickly, and our agendas, we generally put together almost a month out at this point in time. So if council is good with the current form and structure, we'll move more quickly to get that adopted. We can always fine tune it as we go, including bringing other legislative platforms into the mix as well for council to consider. We try to keep the cities broad and flexible so we can adapt to the changing legislature and what's happening there. The North Texas Commission has a very strong alignment for legislative priorities because of what they do, and that's why you see that level of detail in there. For us, it's more of making sure we understand the broad philosophies of the council and how those would apply to certain bills. So for us, it's the resolutions designed to be flexible for council, and then we can always come back and add more. What I'd hate to do is get us caught trying to perfect a legislative platform that crosses multiple organizations and us lose some traction on some conversations with bills that are going to move quickly.
All right, so why don't we each take time to review this individually and then discuss in your one-on-one with the city manager, and that way we can figure out how we move forward from there as it relates to these initiatives. Fair enough? Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is item C3, discuss future agenda items. Councilman Roman?
Yes, I wanted to add, I'd like to talk about our sign ordinances, and it's fine if it's like in the form of a memo. It doesn't have to come back as a full discussion. I'd like to see how we compare to the sign ordinances of other different governing bodies in the Metroplex.
Just to clarify, based on our conversations we've had together, we're talking about signs in right-of-ways, not signs on buildings. So code
Correct, signs on,
enforcement
yeah,
is
signs
perfect.
on right-of-ways.
Excellent.
And that's it for me.
Thank you. Councilman Baird? Councilman Reed?
Nothing right now.
Thank you. Councilman Jackson?
Nothing at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Neal?
No, sir, nothing at this time, thanks.
Okay. I have 3 items that I'd like to get on the agenda. I've been wanting to have this discussion with the Metroplex Association of Realtors, hopefully at the December meeting, for them to provide an update on Farmers Ranch real estate and short-term rentals. Second would be, I'd like to ask or present a repeal of the resolution that moved the study session to 4 o'clock and move it back to 3 o'clock starting in December. And then I would like to have some discussion regarding establishing other target areas for residential redevelopment. I'm sure each of us has or might have some neighborhoods in their own district, and so I'd like to have a conversation regarding that. Okay. And with that, I will read us into executive session. City Council will convene into closed executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Section 551.072, real property deliberations to discuss the real property located at 13309 Josie Lane. So if we would take 7 minutes, and we will adjourn to the city manager's conference room, have our meeting in there, and then we will see everybody back here at 6 o'clock.